the ceiling fan turned slow and heavy above me. Each rotation pushed a wave of dry, conditioned air down into the small office. The room smelled like coffee that had been sitting on a hot burner since 6 in the morning, bitter and burnt, mixed with the sharp scent of fresh printer toner. Afternoon sunlight cut through the plastic window blinds. The light laid sharp, yellow stripes across the thick stack of documents sitting on the wooden desk. Outside the window, a small asphalt parking lot backed up against a massive live oak tree. The low, steady hum of traffic rolling down Interstate 35 drifted through the glass, a constant reminder of the world moving forward while I sat perfectly still. I was wearing real clothes for the first time in over 2 months. My favorite denim jeans hung loose around my hips, a quiet testament to the weight I had left behind in the hospital bed. I had on a soft flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and my mother's old gray beanie pulled down over my ears. My scalp was mostly bare underneath it now. I looked down at the heavy metal pen resting in my right hand. The skin across my knuckles looked thin. The blue veins showed clear and bright through the pale surface. My wrist bones pressed hard against the cuff of my sleeve. This was the exact same hand that had signed the beneficiary change forms in a sterile human resources office 5 months ago. It was the same hand my mother had used to sign the papers my father brought her all those years ago. But there was one massive difference today. My hand was not shaking. I was reading every single word on the page before the ink ever touched the paper. The attorney sat across from me. She kept her hands folded over her legal pad. She had been watching me read the final page for 3 full minutes without saying a word. "Do you want to take some more time?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, professional, keeping a careful distance from the gravity of the paperwork. I kept my eyes on the signature line. "No, I have lost enough time." I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name in clean, dark ink. The letters flowed steady and precise. There was no hesitation. This was the final signature in a very long chain of documents. I set the pen down gently on the edge of the desk. The metal clicked against the wood. I did not smile. I did not feel a sudden rush of victory or relief. The tight knot that had lived in the bottom of my stomach for 10 weeks simply stopped pulling. It was just done. 3 weeks ago, I was still counting ceiling tiles. I had gotten very good at it. There were 212 tiles in my hospital room, if you included the half tiles cut to fit around the air conditioning vents. Day after day, I lay flat on my back and stared up at that grid. My world had shrunk down to the size of a plastic mattress and the quiet beep of a heart monitor. By day 47, I had stopped counting the tiles. I had stopped counting anything at all. Then came day 48. A night nurse I barely knew walked into my room, slid a piece of paper under my pillow, and completely shattered the quiet little prison I had built for myself. The descent into that isolation had been slow. It started on day 22 of my treatment. The hospital room smelled intensely of industrial bleach and the faint, metallic tang of the intravenous fluids dripping into my arm. My father walked through the door just after lunch. He was wearing a neatly tucked navy polo shirt and khaki pants. His silver hair was brushed perfectly into place. He looked exactly like the kind of responsible, caring father who took time out of his busy schedule to visit his sick daughter. He was holding a small bouquet of flowers wrapped in cheap, crinkly cellophane. Carnations from the grocery store, red and white. The edges of the petals were already starting to turn slightly brown. They were the exact kind of flowers you buy at the checkout lane when you need to look like you made an effort. He set the plastic vase on the rolling tray table. He pulled the vinyl visitor chair closer to the bed and sat down. He patted his knees with flat hands. "Sophie says hello," he said. He looked out the window, avoiding the sight of the tubes connecting me to the wall. "She is swamped right now. The caterer changed the menu at the last minute, and you know how your sister gets about the details." "Yeah," I said. My throat was dry. Swallowing felt like dragging sandpaper down my neck. "Janet sends her love too," he continued. "She wanted to come up today, but she had to stay back and help Sophie lock down the new deposit for the reception hall. Tell her I am fine." My father nodded. He checked his watch. He had been sitting in the chair for exactly 35 minutes. Most of that time had been filled with his stories about the car dealership, the weather in Round Rock, and the rising cost of wedding venues. He had not asked a single question about the chemotherapy. He had not asked what the oncologist said during morning rounds. He had not asked if I was in pain. He placed his hands on the armrests and pushed himself up to a standing position. "I have to run, kiddo. Sophie needs me to go down to the tailor and try on my vest for the ceremony. You need anything before I head out?" He asked the question while he was already walking toward the door. "No," I said. "I have everything I need." "All right then, you get some rest." He walked out. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind him. The room went perfectly silent, save for the rhythmic beeping of the machine next to my bed. I turned my head and looked at the grocery store carnations sitting on the tray, red and white, cheap cellophane. A sudden, sharp memory surfaced in my mind. He had brought the exact same flowers to my mother's hospital room 12 years ago, the exact same colors, the exact same plastic wrapping. I stared at the ragged edges of the petals. My jaw ached. I realized I was grinding my teeth together. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. My fingers felt thick and clumsy from the neuropathy, but I managed to unlock the screen. I opened my messages and found my text thread with Leah. I typed slowly. "Dad just left. He talked about the wedding the whole time." Leah replied almost instantly. "I am sorry, Amber. I can come by tonight and bring you decent food." "It is okay," I typed back. "I am just really glad I changed my life insurance beneficiary back in March. I do not even know why I thought to do it then. It just felt right." I locked the phone and let it rest on my chest. After that day, the visits stopped completely. The days began to blur together into one long, gray stretch of time. Day 28 was the last time my father walked into the room. Day 29, my stepmother called to tell me that my father really needed to focus on Sophie's wedding that week, and she knew I would understand. Day 30, I tried calling him. The call went straight to voicemail. Day 31, I tried again. Voicemail again. On day 32, I picked up the phone, stared at his name on the contact list, and put the phone back down. I never called him again. From day 33 to day 47, it was just me and the ceiling tiles. Leah came by every 2 or 3 days with her laptop, bringing me takeout containers of chicken pho and keeping me anchored to the world outside the hospital. Nobody else came. Nobody else called. The quiet became a physical weight pressing down on my chest. The nurses rotated in and out of my room in predictable intervals. They checked the drip. They took my temperature. They asked if I needed anything for the pain. I said no every single time, even when the answer was yes. I stopped scrolling through social media because the pictures of Sophie's bridal shower and my father's smiling face at a rehearsal dinner in San Antonio made my stomach cramp worse than the chemotherapy ever did. I started measuring time in small, meaningless increments. The number of footsteps a nurse took from the door to my bed, the number of seconds between each beep of the heart monitor, the exact moment each afternoon when the sunlight shifted from the window to the far wall. I did not realize I was disappearing inside myself. The loneliness did not arrive as a single devastating blow. It came in slow, quiet layers, like sediment settling at the bottom of a river. By day 40, I could not remember the last time I had laughed. By day 45, I could not remember the last time I had cried either. I was somewhere in between the two, suspended in a gray numbness that felt less like survival and more like surrender. I let the routine of the nurses, the needles, and the medication take over my entire existence. Then came the night of day 48. It was almost midnight. The hospital room was half dark. The only illumination came from the soft blue glow of the vital signs monitor and a thin, yellow strip of light bleeding in from the hallway under the door. The machine beeped its steady, endless rhythm. I was drifting in that shallow space between waking and sleeping, a side effect of the anti-nausea medication. I heard the squeak of soft rubber shoes on the vinyl floor. I heard the door creak open. It did not open all the way. Someone slipped inside and let the door shut quietly behind them. I did not open my eyes at first. I assumed it was the night nurse coming to check my temperature or adjust the drip. But then I felt something cold slide against the skin of my neck. It was not a hand. It was the sharp edge of a piece of paper. Someone was pushing something under my pillow. My eyes snapped open. Priya was standing right next to the bed. She was the oncology nurse who usually worked the late rotation, but she was not wearing her standard hospital scrubs. She had a heavy denim jacket pulled on over her clothes, and her purse was slung across her shoulder. She looked like she was either just arriving for a shift or sneaking out after one. She leaned down close to my face. "Miss Novak," she whispered. Her voice was urgent and tight. "I need you to wake up completely right now." I blinked against the blue light of the monitor. "Priya? What time is it?" "It is almost midnight. Listen to me very carefully. Your father filed a petition at the Travis County Court. He filed it last Tuesday." I stared at her. The monitor beeped. Beep, beep. The sound seemed entirely disconnected from the words she was saying. "Temporary guardianship of your estate," Priya said. She kept her voice at a harsh whisper, glancing back toward the door. "He is claiming you are incapacitated due to the chemotherapy. He told the court you are unable to manage your own financial affairs. If the judge approves it, he gets total control over your accounts. Everything." The dry air in the room suddenly felt freezing cold. The sharp smell of the antiseptic floor cleaner hit the back of my throat. "How do you know this?" I asked. "He came to the nurse's station after visiting ours," Priya said. "He came twice. He demanded access to your medical file. The first time, I told him no. The second time, he got aggressive, and I had to report it to the floor supervisor. After my shift, I went home and searched his name on the Travis County Public Court records online. The filing is there. It is public." My right hand moved slowly under the pillow. My numb fingers brushed against the paper she had pushed there. I pulled it out. The paper was heavy and thick. It was not a standard printout from the hospital desk. I tilted the pages toward the blue light of the monitor. The heavy black letters at the top of the page jumped out of the shadows. "Application for appointment of temporary guardian of the estate. Proposed ward, Amber Nicole Novak. Applicant, Victor James Novak. Father. Grounds. Cognitive impairment due to chemotherapy treatment, rendering proposed ward unable to manage financial affairs." My stomach dropped so fast it made me dizzy. My hands started to shake. It was not a tremor from weakness. It was pure, unadulterated adrenaline flooding into a body that had been dormant for a month and a half. I stared at the words. Cognitive impairment. Unable to manage affairs. He was telling a judge that my mind was gone. He was doing this while I was lying in a hospital bed, wondering why he was not answering my phone calls. I looked up at the ceiling. The 212 tiles stared back down at me. Priya reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, square yellow sticky note. She placed it on the tray table next to the dead carnations. "You need a lawyer," Priya said. "You need one tomorrow morning." I looked at the yellow note. It had a phone number written on it in hurried blue ink. Priya took a step back toward the door. She stopped with her hand on the metal handle. She turned back and looked me dead in the eyes. "You are not confused," she said. Her voice lost the rushed whisper and became completely steady. "And you are not alone, but you have to act before this hearing happens." She opened the door and slipped out into the hallway. The door clicked shut. The yellow light disappeared. I sat alone in the dark. I held the heavy legal paper in my hands. The edges dug into my palms. I closed my eyes and pictured my mother's hospital room 12 years ago. I pictured my father standing at the foot of her bed, holding a manila folder, telling her he just needed a few quick signatures to take care of things while she rested. I pictured my own 19-year-old self standing in the doorway, watching it happen, keeping my mouth shut because I was terrified of being left completely alone. He was doing it again, because I had let him do it the first time. I reached for my phone. I bypassed the yellow sticky note entirely. I did not need a legal hotline right this second. I needed evidence. I opened my contacts and tapped Leah's name. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was groggy with sleep. "Amber? Is everything okay?" "Leah, listen to me," I said. My voice was completely flat. "There is a cardboard box sitting in my storage unit in Pflugerville. It has my mother's name written on the top. I have never opened it." "Okay, Leah said slowly, the sleep fading from her words. Do you want me to get it? I need you to go to my apartment first thing in the morning and get the storage key from my desk, I told her. Bring the box here. And bring your laptop. I will be there, Leah said. What is going on? I looked down at the petition resting on my lap. The word ward stared back at me. I am going to war, I said. I ended the call. The morning light was just beginning to turn the dark hospital window a pale shade of gray when Leah walked into the room. She showed up right at 7 o'clock. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind her. She was carrying her thick silver laptop, a tangled white charger cord, and a large stainless steel thermos. She knew better than to bring paper cups from the cafeteria. The smell of damp cardboard always made my stomach turn, especially after a treatment cycle. The rich scent of dark roast coffee filled the sterile room, chasing away the lingering odor of floor bleach and rubbing alcohol. She poured me a small cup. I held it in both hands just to feel the heat seeping into my pale skin. We did not talk about the storage unit or the old cardboard box waiting in Pflugerville. There was no time to dig into the past yet. We had to dismantle the immediate trap sitting right in front of us. Leah opened her laptop on the rolling tray table. The keyboard clicked rapidly under her fingers as she started searching. We spent the next 2 hours hunting through the Texas Estates Code. Chapter 12, 51. Temporary Guardianship. The words on the glowing screen were dense and heavy. A temporary guardianship could last up to 60 days. The court was required to appoint an attorney ad litem to represent the person being targeted. A hearing had to take place within 10 days of the initial filing, but the person targeted had the right to contest it. They could ask the judge to postpone the hearing for up to 30 days to build a proper defense. And most importantly, the applicant needed a medical certificate signed by a doctor to prove the ward was truly incapacitated. He needs a doctor to sign a certificate, Leah said. She turned the laptop screen toward the bed. I looked at the highlighted text on the webpage. There is no way Dr. Huang would sign something like that. She is my oncologist. She sees me every week. She knows perfectly well that I am completely lucid. Leah kept her eyes fixed on the screen. So who did he get to sign it? The room went completely quiet for 3 full seconds. The heart monitor beeped its steady, ignorant rhythm. We just looked at each other. The implication hung in the cold air like thick smoke. My father had someone else lined up. We called the legal aid hotline right after that realization. The woman on the phone listened to my situation and immediately transferred me to Lorraine Voss. Lorraine specialized in guardianship contests. She told me over the phone that she took these cases pro bono because she had seen this exact playbook run against vulnerable people too many times. Her voice was sharp, fast, and completely devoid of empty pity. Her first move was to file a formal motion to postpone the hearing. We desperately needed time. The court granted the motion before noon. The hearing was officially pushed back. The next afternoon, the court-appointed attorney ad litem arrived at my room. She was a woman in her late 50s wearing sensible black leather shoes and tortoiseshell reading glasses hanging from a silver chain. Her name was Miss Gable. Her job was to interview me and report back to the judge. She set her leather briefcase on the tray table. The brass locks clicked loudly. When she opened it, the smell of fresh printer toner and crisp paper drifted out into the room. It was the scent of official business. Miss Gable pulled out a yellow legal pad and a silver pen. "Can you tell me how much money you currently have in your checking account?" she asked. She kept her pen hovering over the blank paper. I did not even blink. $4,218. I checked it on my banking application this morning. She wrote that down. "Can you describe your current medical treatment plan?" "It is the ACT protocol," I told her. My voice was calm and measured. 4 cycles of doxorubicin and cyclophosphamide, followed by 4 cycles of paclitaxel. I am currently on cycle number 5. The side effects include fatigue, nausea, hair loss, and mild neuropathy in my fingers. As for cognitive issues, there is no chemo brain. You can check my medical chart. Miss Gable paused. She looked at me over the thick rims of her glasses. "Why do you think your father filed this petition?" It was the first time I let silence sit in the room. I looked at the bare white wall above her head. I felt the slow, steady beat of my own pulse in the side of my neck. Because he needs money, I finally said, and he thinks I am too weak to tell him no. Miss Gable wrote for a long time. She did not offer any sympathetic smiles or gentle nods. She was a professional gathering facts. Before she packed up her briefcase, she looked at me directly. She told me she saw absolutely no evidence of cognitive incapacity. Her preliminary assessment to the court would reflect exactly that. Lorraine filed our formal contest and a motion to dismiss later that afternoon. I lay back against the stiff hospital pillows and let out a long breath. I felt incredibly light. The crushing weight of the last 2 days lifted off my chest. I had fought back. I had spoken up, and the legal system had actually listened to me. Leah came by that evening with 2 steaming bowls of chicken pho. We sat in the dim light and ate in quiet celebration. I thought with absolute certainty that it was over. I thought the nightmare was a simple misunderstanding that the judge would sweep away. Later that night, Priya stopped by my room. She checked the empty hallway before stepping inside. "I wrote up an incident report," she whispered. She stood close to the edge of the bed. "About your father coming to the nurse's station after hours. Both times he came, he asked for your medical file, and both times he was denied. I documented everything. It is in the hospital system now. That is all I can do without losing my job." I nodded slowly. I thanked her. I registered the information, but my brain was too tired to understand the true weight of it yet. I closed my eyes after she left. I slept deeply for the first time in 50 days. The monitor beeped like a gentle lullaby. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. The phone call from Lorraine came right after my morning blood draw. Her sharp voice was tight with unmistakable frustration. "Your father has a new lawyer," Lorraine said, "and they just filed an amended petition. They attached a medical certificate to it." I sat up straight. The plastic mattress cover crinkled loudly under my weight. "From who? Dr. Huang would never sign that." "It is from a Dr. Paul Rennick," Lorraine said. "He is a private physician here in Austin." "I have never met that man in my entire life," I said. My voice grew louder. "I do not know who that is." "He claims he reviewed your medical records," she explained. "He certified that you exhibit signs of chemotherapy-induced cognitive decline. He stated your condition is consistent with a diminished capacity to manage financial affairs." "What records?" I demanded. My hand gripped the edge of the cotton blanket. The neuropathy made my fingers tingle painfully, but I held on tighter. I never authorized anyone to access my medical files. The ground disappeared from under me. The cold air of the room hit my bare skin like ice. My father had not just walked into a courthouse on a whim. He had planned this out carefully. He had anticipated my resistance. He had found a doctor willing to sign a legal document declaring me mentally unfit. It did not matter that I had never met the man. It did not matter that the doctor was likely a friend doing a favor or someone my father had paid off. What mattered was that there was now an official medical expert telling the court that my mind was gone. It was my word against a licensed physician. "We need Dr. Huang to write a formal counter-opinion," Lorraine said, breaking through my racing thoughts. "And we need to figure out exactly how Dr. Rennick got his hands on your information. We have to prove he has no legal basis for his evaluation." "Where did he get the records?" I asked. "That is the question we have to answer," Lorraine replied. I hung up the phone. The quiet room felt like a cage again. The victory from 3 days ago evaporated completely. A cold, hard anger settled into the center of my chest. He was not just trying to take my money. He was trying to erase my voice entirely. He had planned every single step of this trap. The anger sat heavy in my chest all through the night and into the next morning. It was day 54. The sunlight was too bright against the white walls. My phone buzzed on the plastic tray table around noon. The caller identification displayed Sophie. I answered the call. I heard a wet sniffle before she even spoke. Sophie was crying. Her breath hitched over the line. "Amber," she said. Her voice trembled. "Dad just wants to help you. He is just trying to help." I shifted against the stiff pillows. "Sophie, he filed a petition to take over my finances. He wants legal guardianship of my estate. That is not helping." "He said you are confused from the treatments," she said. She was speaking quickly, rushing the words the way she always did when she was trying to avoid a fight. He told me the medication is making you paranoid. You are going through so much right now, and he just wants to handle the stress for you. It is just a formality. I stopped talking. I just listened to her breathe over the phone. I heard the desperate need in her voice to believe the man who raised her. She sounded exactly like I did 12 years ago. She had been taught her entire life that our father always knew best, that he always protected us. I realized right then that I could not explain this to her. Not over the phone. She was 26 years old, but she was still the little girl who needed her dad to be the hero. I have to go, Sophie, I said softly. I hung up the phone. The isolation wrapped around me tighter than before. My father was not just fighting me in court. He was twisting the narrative for the rest of my family. The next morning was day 55. Leah walked through the hospital door right after breakfast. She was carrying a medium-sized cardboard box. The cardboard was stained and yellowed with age. Someone had written on the lid with a thick black marker, "Renee, papers." It was my mother's handwriting. The box looked much heavier than it was. Leah set it down on the edge of the bed. A smell drifted up the moment she took the lid off. It was the scent of old paper and dry dust, mixed with a very faint, lingering trace of a floral perfume. It was the perfume my mother used to wear. 12 years had passed, but that smell was still trapped right there in the cardboard. My fingers went completely cold. I reached inside. I pulled out old tax returns. I found copies of birth certificates and an expired car insurance policy. I touched the leather cover of a small journal, but I set it aside on the blanket. Then my hand brushed against something sitting flat at the very bottom. It was a manila folder. The paper was brittle and stained brown around the edges. I pulled it out and opened it across my lap. My breathing completely stopped. The header printed at the top of the page was identical to the one Priya had slid under my pillow a week ago. The exact same legal formatting, the exact same court system, only the names and the dates were different. Application for appointment of temporary guardianship of the estate. Proposed ward, Renee Marie Novak. Applicant, Victor James Novak, husband. Grounds, cognitive impairment caused by chemotherapy treatment, rendering the proposed ward unable to manage financial affairs. My hands started to shake. The brittle paper rattled loudly in the quiet room. I read the words again. Then I read them a third time. It was the exact same language. He had used the exact same legal strategy. The only difference was that he had swapped out the word husband for father. He had swapped out my mother's name for mine. I looked at the date stamped in the top corner. It was filed 4 months before my mother died. Amber, Leah said. Her voice was cautious. She stepped closer to the bed. What did you find? I could not form the words. I just held the yellowed paper out to her. Leah took it. Her eyes scanned the page. I watched her face completely change. Her face went completely still. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. "Oh my God," Leah whispered. "He did this to my mother," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from the other side of the room. "Amber, this is—" Leah trailed off, staring at the document. "Let me see the rest of it," I said. I snatched the folder back. My fingers fumbled as I flipped to the second page. I was looking for the medical certificate attached to the back. I scanned down to the signature line at the very bottom. Dr. Paul Rennick. I traced the name with my thumb. It is the exact same doctor. The entire world seemed to drop away. The steady beep of the heart monitor faded into a distant hum that I could no longer hear. I placed the new petition next to the old one on the white cotton blanket. I stared at them side by side. They were carbon copies, 12 years apart. The exact same playbook, the exact same predator. For 12 years, I had known exactly what kind of man my father was. For 12 years, I had kept my mouth shut. I had convinced myself that keeping the peace was the safest option. But my silence had never protected me. It had only protected him. It had given him the cover he needed to do it all over again. He had filed that petition while my mother was dying, but he had withdrawn it 6 weeks before she passed away. He never took it to a hearing. He never needed a judge. He had simply brought the transfer papers to her hospital room and let her sign away the accounts while she was too weak to fight him. It was perfectly clean. Nobody else ever knew the petition existed. I carefully folded both documents and placed them back into the manila folder. I set the folder on the rolling tray table next to my bed. I looked up at Leah. "Call Lorraine," I told her. "Tell her I have more evidence," but I did not speak to the lawyer right then. I needed the rest of the day to let the reality settle into my bones. That night, I lay flat on my back in the dark. I stared up at the ceiling. I did not count the 212 tiles. For the first time in nearly 2 months, I was actually thinking. The memory of my mother's hospital room flooded into my mind. I was 19 years old again. I was standing in the doorway. The room was dark, smelling of sickness and fear. I saw my father standing next to her bed. I saw him slide a green folder onto her lap. I saw my mother look up at him. Her eyes were cloudy and unfocused from the pain medication. Her hand was trembling violently as she held the pen. "Just a few signatures," my father had said. His voice was warm and reassuring. "Just to take care of the bills while you rest." I had stood right there in the doorway. I had watched him drain her accounts. I knew something was terribly wrong. My stomach had knotted into tight coils, but I never opened my mouth. I never stepped into the room. Why did I stay quiet? The answer tasted like ash in my mouth. Because I was terrified. She was dying, and he was the only parent I had left. If I spoke up, if I called him out, he would abandon me too. I would lose both of them at the exact same time. So I swallowed the truth. I buried it deep in my chest, and 12 years later, it was still sitting there, rotting away my courage. Keeping quiet was not bravery. Keeping quiet was a choice. I had chosen to let him do it. But then, a different thought arrived. One I had never allowed myself to think before. My mother had deserved a witness. She had deserved one person in that room to look at what was happening and say the words out loud. She had deserved someone who would pick up the phone, call a lawyer, tell a nurse, tell anyone. She had been lying in a hospital bed, her body eating itself alive, and the one person who was supposed to protect her was the one holding the pen to her hand. She did not need a hero, she just needed a voice. And I had been standing right there, in the doorway, with a voice I refused to use. The realization cracked something open inside my chest that had been sealed shut for 12 years. This was not about protecting my bank accounts. This was never about the money. This was about whether I was going to spend the rest of my life being the girl who stood in the doorway, or whether I was going to finally step into the room. My jaw tightened in the dark. My hands balled into tight fists against the sheets. The deep, heavy guilt morphed into something entirely different. The cold fear vanished. A bright, sharp clarity flooded my chest. I noticed that the tight knot that had been sitting behind my ribs for over a decade was completely gone. I noticed it the way you notice when a background noise you stopped hearing a long time ago finally stops. I could make a different choice now. I did not just want to stop him from taking my money. This was not just a legal battle anymore. My mother had deserved someone to stand up in that room and speak the truth for her. She had deserved someone to fight back. And if I did not do it now, nobody ever would. I reached over to the table and picked up my phone. The blue light illuminated the dark room. It was 1:47 in the morning. I scrolled to Lorraine's contact and hit the call button. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was wide awake. "I found something," I said. The words came out clear and solid. "He did this before. To my mother. 12 years ago. And he used the exact same doctor." Lorraine did not ask me to repeat myself. She did not offer empty sympathy over the telephone line at 2 in the morning. She simply asked me to read every single word of the old document aloud to her. By the time the sun came up over Austin on day 56, she had completely overhauled our legal strategy. She filed an expanded contest with the Travis County Probate Court the very next morning. She attached a certified copy of my mother's 12-year-old petition directly to the new filing. But she did not stop there. Lorraine drafted a formal subpoena for the hospital incident logs, specifically targeting the nights Priya had documented my father's attempts to access my medical chart. She submitted a formal request for the judge to investigate Dr. Rennick and the exact method he used to obtain my private medical information. Then, she filed a separate, parallel report with Adult Protective Services for suspected financial exploitation. "This is no longer a case about a worried father overstepping his bounds," Lorraine told me over the phone later that afternoon. "This is a documented pattern of predatory guardianship filings targeting vulnerable family members during a medical crisis." "I need to tell Sophie," I said. My hand gripped the plastic edge of the hospital bed. "She needs to know what he is doing." "Not yet," Lorraine replied. Her voice was steady, anchoring me down. "We do not show our hand to anyone until we are standing in front of the judge. We handle the court first. You can handle your family later." 2 days later, on the morning of day 58, I sat propped up against the stiff hospital pillows. My laptop was open on the rolling tray table in front of me. The screen displayed a live video feed of the probate courtroom downtown. I was wearing my flannel shirt and my mother's gray beanie. The silver pole holding my intravenous drip stood visible right behind my shoulder. I looked exactly like what I was, a cancer patient, but I kept my chin leveled and my eyes never wavered from the camera lens. My father sat at a wide oak table on the left side of the screen. He wore a crisp blue polo shirt tucked neatly into his slacks. His silver hair caught the harsh fluorescent light of the courtroom. He looked like the picture of gentle concern. He kept his hands folded on the table. He did not look up at the monitor where my face was displayed. The audio fed through my laptop speakers with a slight, tinny echo. I could hear the faint rustle of legal pads, the low hum of the air conditioning, and the rapid, rhythmic clicking of the court reporter typing away in the corner. Lorraine stood at the podium. She did not raise her voice. She laid out the pieces of the defense with cold, methodical precision. She started with the attorney ad litem report, confirming that I demonstrated full cognitive capacity. She submitted a sworn statement from Dr. Huang, my primary oncologist, explicitly stating that I suffered from no chemotherapy-induced cognitive decline and that she had evaluated me personally every single week for the past 2 months. Then, Lorraine turned her attention to the medical certificate my father had submitted. "Dr. Rennick has never met my client," Lorraine told the court. "He has never conducted a physical or psychological examination of Amber Novak. His certificate is based entirely on records he obtained through means that are currently under review by this court and by hospital administration." My father's attorney stood up, straightening his suit jacket. "Objection, Your Honor. The applicant acted within his rights to consult a physician regarding his daughter's declining state." "A declining state my client does not possess," Lorraine countered smoothly. She picked up a thick manila folder from her table. "And this is not the first time the applicant has manufactured a medical crisis to gain control of a family member's estate." Lorraine placed my mother's petition side by side with mine on the evidence projector. The 2 documents appeared on my laptop screen. 12 years ago," Lorraine said, the echo of her voice filling the high ceiling of the courtroom. "Mr. Novak filed an identical application for temporary guardianship. The proposed ward was his late wife, Renee Novak. The grounds were identical. The language was identical. The examining physician was the exact same Dr. Paul Rennick." My father finally looked up. His head snapped toward the projector screen. "This is completely irrelevant," his attorney argued, his voice rising in pitch. "That was a 12-year-old petition that was voluntarily withdrawn by my client before a hearing ever took place." "It was withdrawn," Lorraine said, turning to look directly at my father, "because Mr. Novak had already obtained the financial signatures he needed from his dying wife. He did not need the court anymore because he had gotten what he wanted directly from her hospital bed. My client asks the court today to consider a simple question. Is this the behavior of a compassionate caregiver, or is this a calculated pattern of exploitation?" The judge leaned forward, resting his chin on his folded hands. He looked at my father's attorney. "I will allow it. Proceed." Lorraine did not give them a single second to recover. She produced the subpoenaed hospital logs. She read Priya's incident reports aloud, detailing the exact times and dates my father had demanded my medical file from the nurses' station, the times he was denied, and the subsequent days when Dr. Rennick suddenly requested those same files for a blind consultation. I watched my father's face on the screen. His jaw was locked tight. The warm, folksy demeanor he always carried was completely gone. "And there is one final matter," Your Honor, Lorraine said. She picked up a single sheet of paper. My client changed all beneficiary designations on her life insurance policies, her retirement accounts, and her savings accounts 3 months before her cancer diagnosis. The assets, Mr. Novak is currently seeking to control through this guardianship proceeding will not pass to him, regardless of the outcome of any medical treatment. I stared right at my father through the lens of my webcam. He heard the words about the beneficiary change. I watched the realization hit him. The muscles around his eyes twitched. It was not shame that crossed his face. It was pure, cold calculation. He was doing the math in his head, realizing the money was already entirely out of his reach. The mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing the empty, grasping void underneath. Then his expression went blank again, but it was too late. The judge had been watching him too. The judge turned his attention away from the lawyers and looked directly at my father. Mr. Novak, the judge said, his voice dropping an octave, did you file a similar petition regarding your late wife, Renee Novak, 12 years ago? My father's attorney asked for a sidebar. Denied, the judge snapped. Answer the question, Mr. Novak. My father cleared his throat. He shifted his weight in the heavy wooden chair. That was a different situation, different circumstances entirely. The language in the petition is nearly identical, the judge stated flatly. The courtroom went dead silent. The only sound was the clicking of the court reporter. The judge looked down at the documents in front of him, then back up at my father. This petition is dismissed, the judge announced. He struck his gavel once. The court notes a deeply troubling pattern of behavior in these filings. I am officially referring this matter to Adult Protective Services to continue their investigation into financial exploitation. Mr. Novak, you are ordered to pay all of your daughter's legal fees associated with this contest. We are adjourned. My father stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He did not look at the camera. He did not look at the judge. He simply turned around and walked out of the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom. The video feed cut to black. I sat alone in my hospital room. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright slowly drained out of my blood. I closed the laptop. I did not feel gleeful. I did not want to celebrate. Watching his face crumble had brought a complicated wave of pity, anger, and profound exhaustion. But beneath all of that, a quiet, solid foundation of relief finally settled into my chest. The fight was over. My phone buzzed on the tray table. Leah's name lit up the screen. I picked up. It is done, I said. My voice cracked on the second word. The composure I had been holding together for 10 days finally split open like a paper bag in the rain. Leah did not say anything at first. She just breathed into the phone with me. She let me sit in the mess of it. After a long minute, she spoke. You did something your mom could not do, Leah said quietly. You made him answer for it. I pressed the phone against my ear and stared at the blank laptop screen. My reflection stared back. I looked thin and pale and exhausted. The gray beanie sat low over my bare scalp. My eyes were bloodshot, but they were clear. I need to sleep, I whispered. Then sleep, Leah said. I will be there first thing in the morning. I hung up the phone. I turned on my side, pulled the thin hospital blanket up to my chin, and closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, the darkness behind my eyelids did not feel like a cage. It felt like rest. 2 days passed. The morning of day 60 brought a soft knock at my door. I looked up from my breakfast tray. Sophie was standing in the doorway. She had not called ahead. She was holding a large leather purse with both hands, gripping the strap so hard her knuckles were white. Her eyes were red and swollen. She walked slowly into the room and stopped at the foot of my bed. Lorraine had sent her the public court records the day after the hearing. Sophie had read everything. I did not know, Sophie whispered. Her voice broke on the last word. I know, I said gently. Why did you not tell me? She asked. A tear spilled over her eyelashes and tracked down her cheek. When you found out what he was doing, why did you not say anything to me? I looked at my younger sister. I looked at the shape of her face, the way she tilted her head when she was confused. She looked so much like our mother right then. Because 12 years ago, I did not tell anyone either, I answered. The truth felt heavy but necessary. I was too used to being quiet. I was too used to letting him control the story. Sophie wiped her face with the back of her hand. About Mom. Did he really? Did he do that to her? It was the exact same petition, I said. He used the exact same doctor. He used the exact same legal language. He filed it 4 months before Mom died, and then he withdrew it 6 weeks before she passed. I paused to let that sink in. He withdrew it because he did not need the court anymore. He had already gotten her to sign over everything directly from her hospital bed. Sophie sank into the vinyl visitor chair. She pressed her palms flat against her closed eyelids. I let the silence stretch out. I watched her try to assemble the man she knew against the man I was describing. She was 26, but right now, she was standing exactly where I had stood at 19. The man she thought hung the moon had just been exposed as a shadow. She did not suddenly stand up and declare war on him. She did not promise to cut him off forever. "I need time," Sophie finally said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Take all the time you need," I told her. It was the most honest thing either of us could have said. She stood up and adjusted the strap of her purse. She looked at the floor, hesitating. "The wedding is next week. Do you want me to postpone it?" I leaned back against the pillows. "No. You go get married. You go live your life, Sophie." I paused, letting a small, dry breath escape my chest. "But if he asks to hold on to the envelopes with the wedding cash at the reception, tell him no." Sophie stopped. She looked up at me. A very small, wet laugh escaped her lips. I smiled back. It was a tiny, fractured moment, but it was the first time we had smiled together in months. She nodded once, turned around, and walked out into the hallway. A week later, the morning sun poured through the hospital window, painting the room in a bright, specific shade of Texas blue. I sat on the edge of the mattress. My next chemotherapy session was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. Cycle 6 out of 8. My fingers buzzed with neuropathy, making it difficult to grip small objects, but I held my pen firmly. The air smelled like fresh, strong coffee. The heart monitor next to my bed was completely dark. The doctors no longer needed to track my vitals around the clock. The silence in the room was no longer oppressive. It felt like space. It felt like room to breathe. The old cardboard box with my mother's name on it sat on the tray table. The lid was closed. Resting right on top of it was a brand new manila folder. Inside were Lorraine's legal files, the official court order dismissing the guardianship, and the receipt for the pending investigation by Adult Protective Services. I had taken the old petition from 12 years ago and paper-clipped it directly to the new one. They belonged together now. Priya walked into the room just before her shift ended. She was holding a real ceramic mug filled with dark roast coffee. She handed it to me. The heat soaked straight through my cold palms. "Cycle 6, Priya said. She leaned against the doorframe. "Cycle 6, I agreed, taking a slow sip. "Only 2 more to go after this one." I looked over the rim of the mug. "I know how to count. I have gotten very good at counting." Priya smiled. She understood exactly what I meant. She looked at the stack of paperwork resting on top of the old cardboard box. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked softly. I turned my head and looked out the window at the morning traffic rolling down the interstate. "Not yet," I said, "but I will be." After she left to fetch the intravenous bags, I set the coffee mug down. I reached for the cardboard box. I pulled off the new legal folder and opened the old lid. I reached down to the bottom and pulled out the small leather journal I had found last week. I opened the stiff cover. The pages were filled with my mother's neat, looping handwriting. I turned past the grocery lists and the old calendar dates. Near the back of the book, I found a page dated just 3 months before she died. It was a list. She had written down the name of her life insurance provider. She had listed the exact balance of her savings account. She had written down the contact number for a local attorney. My breath caught in my throat. I traced her handwriting with my numb fingertips. My mother had known. She was not just a passive victim lying in the dark. She had seen what he was doing. She had been documenting her assets. She had been preparing to fight back. She had just run out of time, and her body had given out before she could make the call. I closed the leather journal. I did not put it back inside the box. I set it gently on the tray table, right next to the new legal folder. I left the cardboard box sitting out in the open, where the sunlight could hit it. I was never going to hide it in a dark storage unit ever again. I reached up and adjusted the soft gray beanie on my head. I could feel the short, fuzzy growth of new hair pushing up against the fabric underneath. I did not need to wear the hat for warmth anymore, but I kept it on. It belonged to her. Priya walked back into the room holding the clear plastic bag of medication. She hung it on the silver pole and began wiping down the port in my arm. I settled back against the pillows and let my eyes drift upward. I looked at the white squares covering the ceiling. 212 tiles, 2 petitions, 12 years of silence, and 1 cycle completely broken. I watched the first drop of medicine fall through the clear plastic tubing. I took a deep breath of the cool, conditioned air. I did not need to count the tiles anymore. If you are listening to this and you recognized something in my story, I need you to hear this part. Maybe it is not cancer for you. Maybe it is not a guardianship petition. Maybe it is a parent who always managed the money and never let you see the accounts. Maybe it is a spouse who tells you that you are too emotional to understand the finances. Maybe it is a family member who shows up at the hospital not to hold your hand, but to ask you to sign something while you are too tired to read it. The details change, the costume changes, but the pattern underneath is always the same. Someone waits until you are at your weakest. Then they reach for what is yours and tell you they are doing it for your own good. You will know the pattern by its quiet. It does not announce itself with shouting or threats. It moves through the silence. It moves through the conversations that never happen, the questions nobody asks, the documents you sign because it is easier than fighting. It hides behind phrases like, "I am just trying to help," and "You do not need to worry about this right now," and "Let me handle it for you." The words sound kind. They are designed to sound kind. That is the entire point. If you recognize that voice, the first thing I need you to understand is this: your silence is not protecting you. I kept my mouth shut for 12 years. I told myself it was the smart thing to do. I told myself I was keeping the peace, preserving the family, avoiding unnecessary conflict. But every single day I stayed quiet. I was not protecting myself. I was protecting the person who was hurting me. My silence gave him permission to do it again, and he did. The second thing I need you to understand is that you are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to ask where the money is going. You are allowed to ask why someone needs your signature right now, tonight, before you have had time to think. You are allowed to say, "I want my own lawyer to look at this first." You are allowed to say, "I need to read this myself before I sign anything." No one who loves you will punish you for asking those questions. And if they do punish you for asking, that is all the answer you will ever need. The third thing is about evidence. If something feels wrong, write it down. Write down the date. Write down what was said. Write down who was in the room. Save the text messages. Screenshot the bank statements. Take a photograph of the document before you hand it back. You do not need to know what to do with the evidence right away. You just need to make sure it exists. My mother kept a journal in the bottom of a cardboard box. She wrote down account numbers and attorney phone numbers 3 months before she died. She never made that call, but because she wrote it down, her truth survived. 12 years later, her handwriting on those pages is what saved me. The fourth thing is about asking for help. You will convince yourself that nobody wants to hear your story. You will convince yourself that it is a family matter and you should handle it privately. You will convince yourself that you are overreacting, that it is not that bad, that other people have it worse. Every single one of those thoughts is a wall someone else built inside your head to keep you from reaching the door. Walk through it. Call the legal aid hotline in your state. Call Adult Protective Services if someone you love is being exploited. Call a friend at midnight if that is what it takes. The woman who changed my life was a night nurse who decided that doing the right thing was more important than doing the safe thing. She slid a piece of paper under my pillow and whispered 4 words. "You need a lawyer." That was enough. It was enough to crack the entire thing wide open. The last thing I want to say is about forgiveness. People will ask you if you have forgiven your father, your mother, your sister, whoever played a role in the damage. They will ask this question as though forgiveness is the final boss at the end of a video game, and you cannot move forward until you beat it. That is not how it works. You do not owe forgiveness to someone who has never acknowledged the harm. You do not owe silence to someone who used your silence against you. You do not owe peace to someone who stole yours. What you owe is much simpler than that. You owe yourself the truth, even when it is ugly, even when it costs you the family you thought you had.